and commended him for his courage. Y'all ain't got to like this today, but this is an on-time word. I said to this church over 7 years ago, if Obama is elected before he leaves his office the second term, same-sex marriage would pass across the nation. How many of you all remember that? It has happened. And when the Supreme Court sent their decision out to the public, Obama tweeted again, and he said, "Love wins." I have a serious problem with that. But I have a problem with adultery too. I have a problem with fornication. Amen. I have a problem with lying saints. I have a problem with gambling. Amen. I feel the tension. You see, I have a problem with a lot of stuff. But I'm going to tell you something. It's not even based on how I feel about it. I have a book of instructions. And one of the passages that I read from the book of instructions this morning is to abstain from the very appearance of evil. If it look evil, stay away from it. How many of you know ain't nothing in this world you have to go do? So I just had to go to the company party. They was giving out the bonus checks. Well, you mail mine. Send it in the mail. I ain't got to be at the company. How many of y'all know at company parties, white folk have a habit of getting drunk? This video is going to be posted on YouTube, and I ain't scared. I'm telling the truth. Amen. And when they get drunk, they want to talk. Yeah. Yes. Amen. All right, let me move on. We're in a very peculiar time. The only time that I know in history that men have actually went to look for the devil to get him to help us get certain things approved. And he has given us all the help we need. Amen. So the Lord led me as I was just praying and meditating. God gave me these passages that we read from, and the thought that God gave me is stick with the faith. Stick with the faith. And so as I look through these particular passages, we find at Corinth there was a lot of disturbance and questions about the future of the church. And the Apostle Paul had to address it because something about church people, we get nervous and we look like even afraid when the world makes certain decisions. And so Paul had to deal with this situation to assure the church that we are the body of Christ. And he had to assure the church that no matter what decisions the world makes, it's not going to change anything about Jesus. It's not going to lessen his power. It will not undermine his church. And so Paul had to let the church know, amen, that God is in fact still in charge. Although God allows some things to happen, don't be deceived by the decisions of the world. We must stick with what we have learned. Amen. We must stick with what we've been taught. I know some doctrines we had to make some adjustments. I'll just say it frankly. There are some doctrines we had to make some adjustments. Some of them we meant well, but we didn't really get God's approval on all of them, but we meant well. And because we meant well, God didn't hold it against us. You know, because if we held fast to, well, I'll just preach. If we hold fast to what folk wear and try to determine whether they're going to heaven by what they wear, then most of everybody in the room today will be on their way to hell. Why you say that, preacher? Because in the same passage that the Bible, Old Testament, says about a woman not wearing anything pertaining to a man, in the very same passage, it says you can't mix fabric. So if you got on polyester and silk, or cotton and rayon, you in trouble. You wearing nylon that's made out of, let me move on. That would suggest that most folk in every age and every dispensation would be in trouble. But I thank God for grace. And so even the doctrines that we had to make some adjustments on, we must stick with the truth. We must stick with the message of Jesus. Yes. We must teach that sin is not accepted. I don't care what church you go to. I don't care what you believe. Sin is not acceptable. So we must preach what Jesus have given us to preach. We must hold fast to the apostles' doctrine. And so Paul had to deal with this in this particular church. And we see the same Apostle Paul ran into a similar situation in the Philippian church there at Philippi. And people were struggling with the idea, looked like the world was doing better than the church. It looked like the world was in good shape, and looked like the church was suffering. But how many of you know that if you're really going to live godly, this is a suffering way? Absolutely. If you're going to live godly, you're going to be challenged by the enemy. You're going to be blamed for stuff. You're going to be talked about if you decide to live godly. So Paul had to deal with this church in Philippians. Finally, Paul told them, listen, it may seem like a struggle to you. It may seem hard to you. But Paul said, listen to this. He said, I can and you can do all things through Christ that strengthens you. How many of you know Christ will strengthen you? Do I have any witnesses here today to say, in spite of whatever I face, Christ have always strengthened me? And he will. And he's no less Lord today than he was in the days of the apostle. Jesus is still the same. We look at this church even at Thessalonica. Now they were really, really discouraged because they were dying at a high rate. And something about sickness, disease, and death, that does something to the believer's mind. You know, because God don't heal everybody. It looked like the enemy tried to disturb us by that. He tried to really convince us that prayer don't work. Or he tried to convince us there's something wrong with your faith. He tried to convince you that God didn't hear you and God don't care about you. And in this particular church in Thessalonica, folk were dying. They were just dropping dead. They were being persecuted at a very high rate. They were being martyred. They were being disposed of. And the church became a bit despondent. Matter of fact, the church became discouraged. And so Paul had to write to the church at Thessalonica. He said, send this letter out to the church and encourage the brothers with these words. He said, the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall be the first to rise, and we that are alive and remain shall be caught up together to meet them in the clouds, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Paul had to say this to this church because the church was, they felt like they were losing out. Felt like they were really out of the covering of God. And so that led me to this particular thought today. Stick with the faith. If I may go through a list of things that we are facing today, we have to go to Revelations to really kind of put a handle on it or to grasp it so that we can understand what's going on and what our position should be in these evil times. How many of you know these are perverse days? Men now will do anything. Anything. Nothing is off limits. Television, nothing is off limits. If I had my way, I'd cut Bart Simpson's head off. Huh? Nothing but the devil. Little yellow devil. What's that other idiot name? Another little animated show. Family somebody. He ain't no Family Guy. This is foolishness. Nothing is off limits. SpongeBob with his homosexual overtures. I know what I'm saying. I remember when cartoons was funny. When the coyote chased the roadrunner. When Bugs would make an idiot out of Yosemite Sam. Cartoons was funny. When Woody Woodpecker. But now cartoon sends a message out. And that message is filled with sexual innuendos. Full of it. Nothing is off limits. There's no regulation. In schools, there's no regulation. In government, the Supreme Court have no regulations. Everything now is just open season. There's a man right now in, I believe, Wyoming, after the Supreme Court passed down that ruling. He said, well, I'm going to sue my home state because I want 2 wives. And I don't see nothing wrong with it. And he said he's going to take it to the Wyoming Supreme Court. Why can't I have 2 wives, he said. Nothing is off limits. So we look in the book of Revelation to kind of get a grasp on what we're dealing with and what we're faced with. Jesus began to show John the visions about the 7 churches, which represented the 7 dispensation, or the ages of since the church began throughout time until now. Jesus said to John, 3 things I want you to observe, the things which have been. He said, I want you to look at the things which are, and the things which are to come, or shall be hereafter. And so Jesus points to the church at Ephesus. One of the things we notice at the church at Ephesus, it has to deal with their commitment to the Lord. He said to them, you have left your first love. Now, one notation I want you to think about, he did not say they had lost their first love. They left it. That changes the meaning of it. If you lose something, perhaps you didn't have the ability to grasp it or to obtain it, or perhaps you didn't have the power to keep it and you lost it, but you didn't lose it, you left it. In other words, there's nothing wrong with the church. There's nothing wrong with the Bible. There's nothing wrong with God. There's nothing wrong with Jesus. You didn't lose any of it. You left it. You volunteer left it. The devil didn't take it from you. How many of you know the devil can't take nothing from the people of God? The devil can't make you do nothing. You have to volunteer to do it. What he have is the power of persuasion. And so the Lord said to the church at Ephesus, and we look down through the years, we find somewhere along the line, many just began to leave the truth. They didn't want it. They discarded it. They didn't agree with it. They just left the truth. And so now in America, we got more than 285 different religions. Somebody left their first commitment. How many of you know America used to be a godly nation? Used to be a God-fearing nation. But we didn't lose God. We left God. Church at Smyrna. That church, amen, suffered great persecution. I want you to understand something. Persecution is going to come. Anytime, as I said earlier, you decide to live godly, the devil is going to challenge you. He's going to challenge your way of life. He's going to challenge your culture. He's going to challenge your political system. He's going to challenge your very belief. And you shall suffer persecution. That church at Pergamos, The church at Pergamos is almost where we've experienced in recent years. They compromised. They married themselves to the political system. In other words, the power that the politics really had was given to them by the church. Can you say Catholicism? They compromised. They merged politics with religion. And this is in fact what we're experiencing now. We are trying to decide moral issues by the Constitution. How foolish. Moral issues should be decided by the Bible. But we're trying to mix the Bible and the Constitution. But how many of you know who have the ruling word? God's got the final word. The church there at Thyatira, the Lord called them Jezebel, very decorated, but it's just low down and dirty. Don't have any godliness about them whatsoever. Go through the motion, everything is in place, big old choir, 20 million member audience on TV. Everything looks fantastic. I mean, look like it's going on. Look like all 20 million members is on their way to heaven. Jezebel. All decorated, but full of hatred and bitterness. How many of you know, amen, we see something like that today? Full of false doctrine. And something has happened here over the last 20 years. Church folk that made so many preachers rich, it doesn't even make any good sense. Preachers owning Lear jets and members can't even buy grocery. You know, I just don't want to be that popular that I've got to fly from place to place in less than 3-4 hours. I need my own jet. I don't want to be that popular. I mean, you have to be extremely popular. I understand clearly why some preachers have Lear jets, because of their popularity. They're in such high demand that they don't have time to wait on commercial flights. They ain't got time to go through security. They got to leave New York and be in LA in the next 3-4 hours. They got to leave LA and be in Dallas. They got to leave Dallas, be back in Chicago, all in the same 2 or 3 days. But I don't want to be that popular. You know why? Because I would rather work in one place until I get folks saved there than to hit 100 spots and get nobody saved. And what we're looking at today is a lot of false doctrine. I mean, let's get rich. And people now believe that your substance measures your closeness to Christ. There's a lot of wealthy devils. And there's a lot of poor saints. I'm preaching right. And so the Lord said, you have that Jezebel spirit. You're making everybody believe that your popularity is important. You're making everybody believe that if they look rich, they're going to look saved. You know, now folk don't even want you to know they're doing poorly. Everybody at church is wearing something nice. People borrow clothes to come to church in. Rent cars to go to church in. Jezebel. Everybody look like they're doing fantastic. You look around the church today, you go from church to church, look around. Nobody look like they need nothing. Everybody's on high. That's a Jezebel spirit. Then we have the church at Sardis. Jesus said to them, you are almost dead. It's sad when the house of God becomes dead. When nobody is getting healed, nobody is getting saved, nobody is looking for God, nobody is seeking the right way. Everything is about one person. While the church died, there are some people who are going on up. but they are in a dead church. Jesus said to that church that was almost, he didn't say they were dead, he said it was almost dead. In other words, as I look around America today, we're not quite dead, but we are on hospice. Oh yes, America is on hospice. We're getting prepared to die, and we're dying comfortably. We don't feel no pain. We don't feel no agony. We feel good about ourselves. We are attacking some countries for no reason. They killed Saddam Hussein on a lie. I ain't getting no help here. Huh? The very country that Russia invaded and America prevented Russia from overtaking the country, now America is there trying to take it. We are almost dead. The Lord said to the church that was almost dead, he says, strengthen whatever remains. So look at somebody and say, let's strengthen what we got left. Let's go back to prayer. We still know how to pray. Let's strengthen our prayer. Let's really praise God. We remember of the days when everybody in the house would go up and praise. Let's strengthen what remains. We remember what holiness really is. Sometimes we pretend like we don't. We know what righteous living really is. We know how to walk away from sin. We know exactly what God expects. But we act like we don't. Look at your neighbors and neighbor. We may be almost dead. Strengthen what remains. Come on, look at your neighbors and neighbor. I'm going to work with you. We've got too many young folk that need to be saved. We've got too many situations that our church members are facing. We need to pull ourselves together and put this thing back in order. Look at your neighbor and say, this is still the house of God. Shouldn't have to have no sign in the church to say turn them off. You ought to have enough Jesus. I mean, you know, Jesus didn't use a cell phone. Didn't have no tablet. And I'm going somewhere with this. I know we're in a different age, a different time, but let me show you the thing that angered Jesus. When people was up in the temple doing something that didn't pertain to God, Jesus got mad. You see? Now, if you selling chicken dinners and you doing that for the church welfare, go on sell your chicken dinners. But if you selling chicken dinners for my birthday, I'm going to kick the table over myself. So when they was up in there in God's house doing something that didn't pertain to God, the Bible says Jesus turned the money table over, put some cards together and whipped them out of the church. Look at your neighbor and say, get that mess out of here. Should nobody have to tell us that? Let's strengthen what remains. And then we have the Church of Philadelphia, brotherly love. This church was really called the open door. Open door. God said, I've opened a door that no man can shut. What am I saying there? What I believe the Lord is telling us here is that no matter what government does, no matter what is decided in the land, the door is still open to salvation and can't nobody shut it. You can still reach Jesus. You can still reach heaven. He still answers prayer. He still hears the cries of the righteous. He's still hearing the lost saying, Lord, I want to be saved. I don't care how lost the world is. I don't care what they're doing in the world. I don't care what's going on across